schickte ein General Fliegerstaffeln hinterher. Alarmgeber, wenn's so wär, dabei waren dort am Horizont 99 Luftballons.
And we're live.
Hello and welcome back to another Red and Floaty episode of the First Time Watchers podcast.
Because we like to watch.
My name is Tim Costa.
I'm Hermano de Silva.
And this is Walter Vinci.
And joining us tonight, our dear old friend, the man whose red balloon brings all the children to the yard, from writerandrew.com, Andrew Johnson. Welcome back to the show, Andrew.
Good to be here. That sounded really creepy.
It's the way I like it. Just the way I like it. I wouldn't have it any way else, Andrew. What special films do you have planned out for your high schoolers this year's film club?
Well, we just finished our first short unit on superhero movies, and we're about to start a unit on animated films. So I'm excited about that.
Ooh, what do you have up slated?
We're definitely going to be watching Pinocchio, which is incredible. I actually hadn't watched it in quite a while and rewatched it recently, and it's just really an amazing movie. So we're definitely going to do that, and I'm a big fan of It's Such a Beautiful Day, the Don Hertzfeldt movie.
Oh, okay.
So we'll probably do that, and definitely something from Japan. I just haven't decided what precisely. And I was thinking maybe Who Framed Roger Rabbit? So
That's interesting.
possibly. Yeah, so I don't know. I'm still ironing out the details, but I've got a general idea. The problem is there's so many potential good things to show. It's like, do I want to go stop motion? Do I want to go Pixar, computer animated? You know, there's so many different options when it comes to animation.
I was just going to say, why not something like pre-Pinocchio non-Disney? You know what I mean? There must be some hidden gem back in the early days of Hollywood, or maybe even silent film-wise.
Yeah, I was thinking I'll probably show maybe a few short films as well before main features. So if I can find something really, really good and short that they would find interesting, then that's a possibility.
Excellent. Well, good to have you on board as usual. And what we like to do on the FTW podcast is find a movie that none of us have seen, watch together, and then discuss. These movies could be new, they could be old, or something that's on all of our lists of shame. And if you'd like to send feedback, remember to email us at firsttimewatchers@gmail.com. In this episode, we'll be discussing the latest horror sequel, It Chapter 2. But before we get into that, it is time for Yay or Nay. This is the part of the show where we discuss what we have seen recently on our own. Andrew.
Yeah, I've been watching a lot of stuff lately. One thing I definitely want to be sure to mention is I saw a movie that came out last month, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. I really liked it. I think it's very good. It's probably my third favorite film of the summer, behind The Farewell and another movie I'm going to talk about later. But Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark is a really cool little horror film aimed at teenagers based on the books of the same name. And I was really struck by how prescient it seems and just how intent it seems on capturing the feelings that I think a lot of members of the new generation are feeling. It's a horror movie all about trauma and uncovering the secrets of the past, and also trying to write your a new story for the future.
Sounds awfully familiar.
Sounds like Suspiria.
Well, it struck me as I was watching it that the demographic that the film is aimed at probably would have been children around the time of the Newtown shooting. And I feel like there's a lot of stuff in Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark about how do you cope with trauma? How do you deal with a world that seems like it's intent on writing the same story over and over and perpetuating the same abuses over and over again? How do you escape that? So I thought it was a very politically interesting movie. So I would definitely give that a yay. Because I'm also about to introduce my students to some animated films, at school, I've been watching a lot of animated movies to try and figure out what I want to show. And I've been watching some Miyazaki because Miyazaki is actually a big blind spot for me. So I watched The Castle of Cagliostro, which you can stream on Netflix. I believe it's his first feature-length film, and it's really cool. I really liked it. I'm actually not the biggest fan of Spirited Away, even though I feel like that's the movie of his that most people seem to agree is his best. But I really liked The Castle of Cagliostro, and I'm looking forward to watching some more Miyazaki movies. So that's a yay for me. Have any of y'all seen Castle of Cagliostro?
Not in a long time.
Never.
It's this really interesting kind of a steampunk mashup of like European visuals and Japanese culture. And I'm starting to see the more Miyazaki I watch that's kind of a staple of his. But it's really kind of an interesting aesthetic that I really like. I also watched an animated film from 2004 called Mind Game, which is from the director Masaki Yuasa, and it is trippy. I really liked it. It's very weird. He experiments with a lot of different animation styles, and so there are points throughout the film where the art style will suddenly change, and it's really cool and unique, and it's, like I said, very trippy and kind of psychedelic, and deals with all of these themes about destiny and meaning and how do you make your life count for something before you inevitably die. And it's really cool. So if you haven't seen Mind Game, definitely check that out. And other than that, I guess the only thing worth mentioning is I rewatched The Dark Crystal for the first time in probably 25 years. I really had very little memory of it. I know I saw it at some point when I was a kid, but I rewatched it since there's a new Dark Crystal Netflix series out. And holy crap, that movie is amazing. I was just blown away by the amount of technical craft and skill on display. I just found myself thinking in almost every frame. I was just like, how did they do that? I don't understand. How did you accomplish this? It's just so technically stunning.
I've never seen this.
It's so cool, and the story is a little bit simplistic and archetypal, but the visuals are so good, and just the production design and the art design is so unique and so original that I was completely enraptured by The Dark Crystal. So if you haven't seen The Dark Crystal lately, watch it. It's on Netflix. And I hear that the new TV show is really good too. So I'm hoping to check that out soon.
Cool. Hermano.
Tim, it's your choice. I can either talk some more Naruto,
Oh, God.
or I can talk about the 2 comic book films I watched.
Yeah. Well, of course. Of course. We want to hear about your adventure of catching up with comic book films that you despise, and it's your bane of your existence.
Okay. I'll talk about those 2, I guess. I'm a bit removed from them, especially one of them. One of the other ones I've watched more recently, but I'll talk about the one that's fading from my memory first is Shazam.
Oh, yeah.
YouTube marketing worked on my son. He during his little commercial breaks on YouTube, he was shown Shazam, and he expressed interest, so I rented it, watched it. Didn't really have an interest myself, but perfect for little kids. I think there were only a few moments in it where I was like, the tone all of a sudden changed quite dark and felt a bit akin to what you would see in a horror film.
Oh, yeah.
There were a couple moments. One in a boardroom where, there's, I guess, a silhouette of someone being decapitated.
Yep.
Which I thought was a bit harsh. And even he just was like, what just happened? And I'm like, yeah, I know, right? Like, I felt like I didn't see the film going this graphic, I guess, especially since everything up to that, really hadn't been, it'd been just very kid friendly and stuff. And for the most part, it is. I mean, it kind of pains me because I could see the shift. Like, like this is like the response to like DC being criticized for being, you know, tonally dark, and you know, it's clear that this is like, you know, like more Marvel centric.
I
comic book
agree.
film.
It's pretty generic when you come
Yeah,
down to it. I mean,
it's not-
outside of some of the humorous elements, and I think Zachary Levi is very charming in the role.
Yeah,
And the way it's constructed, like this this wizard, you know, he starts laying out a bunch of gobbledygook when Billy Batson appears, and I almost kind of wish that the movie started off with that historic preamble instead of giving you this dialogue dump in the middle of it.
yeah, and I don't know. There are moments. It's not a bad film. It's just completely vanilla. You know, it's not really reaching for the stars in any level. It's just like, oh, it's just popcorn fun type
Yeah.
film, which I think, you know, the Marvel films, basically that's like the highest they strive to be, you know, and at least for me, like they really do nothing for me aside from like just popcorn entertainment.
Yeah.
So, you know, my son had fun with it, but he hasn't really asked to watch it again, so score. So it's kind of a mild EA, I guess. If you got young kids, just there's a couple moments you might want to prepare them for. And then I bought this on digital video disc. Do you guys remember digital video disc?
Well, that's a
Yes.
that would be DVD.
Yes.
Th-
I
so
bought it on DVD.
It's not
Wow.
a high definition Blu-ray.
No.
Oh boy.
Because the entertainment system in Mia's van, and I thought there was a possibility that my son might want to watch this in the car when we go on long trips, because it's a pretty long film.
Mm.
It's called Avengers Endgame.
Yeah.
3
I'm sorry.
hours and 1 minute. The continuation, conclusion to Avengers Infinity War. Have you guys heard of this film?
Mm.
It's like this like little indie. It's been you know, I was waiting for it to come around here.
Yeah, it didn't get a wide release. I think it only played in maybe a couple hundred theaters across the
Yeah,
country.
not a lot of hype for it either. It was
Yeah.
real under the radar.
Yeah.
Is this a foreign film?
I think so.
Yes, but I think it's English dubbed. You can find it. It's kind of hard though. So it stars Tony Stark, Captain America. Literally every comic book character they've had for the past 10 years are in this film.
Look, no, listen to me. You were at the very beginning. At the very beginning of this franchise, you saw Iron Man. You're like, yeah, and then I was in the fucking theater with you for the first Avengers movie. We were sitting far apart because of how crowded it was, but afterwards, you know. Mia told me that you were laughing your ass off and that you pumped your fist once and that you were really into it and you really, really liked that first Avengers movie. So what the hell happened for you to see
Phase 2 and 3, that's what happened.
Avengers Endgame and be like, ugh, the worst.
At that point, how many films had there been? Like 5?
Sure, yeah.
5 or 6 or something like that? Like Avengers was literally like the 6th film. How many films do we have now? Like 20 something?
People
I mean,
who,
after a while, man,
I
like
get it.
it went from like, you know, white on the gradient scale to like black. Like it's diminishing returns. Like I feel like every film is essentially the same. Even with their attempts at like, oh, this is like a comic book version of a heist film. This is a comic book version of a fucking love story. This is a comic book version of a comedy. Like I don't care. I feel like this film was like remember back in the day, like people would have the criticisms. Like I especially was one of those people where it'd be like, oh, like, isn't it convenient that in the Thor film, like all of a sudden none of the Avengers are around? Like I miss those days now watching this film because I was like, holy shit, like literally everyone is in this film. Half the people don't have anything to do. It really just feels like someone's fan fiction. Like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if like Captain America was able to lift Thor's hammer? Wouldn't it be cool if like, you know, Spider-Man was swinging from, what the fuck was he swinging from? There was like literally no buildings in the vicinity. Like
Giant Man,
I don't know what the hell he was swinging from.
who's in 2 places at once, by the way, in that same scene.
Yeah, I don't know. Like even my son, like I could tell he was not invested. Of course, he's a big Spider-Man guy, and like Spider-Man doesn't really appear until the end, so he was like just not on board for this like this basically long farewell to like 2 characters. I definitely thought Infinity War, if I had to, I mean, it's kind of hard to not compare the two, but Infinity War I thought had a lot more going for it as a story following Thanos. Like this one is just kind of like we're saying goodbye and we're gonna, have these like fan fiction type moments where Tony, they go back in time and like he's able to converse with his father and Captain America fights himself and like I don't know, man. I just was not invested in like all the supposed like somber like pulling at the heartstrings moments. Like of course none of them worked for me because I was just like I'm just not on board. I haven't been on board for a long time. I jumped ship way back when I was pumping my fist during the first Avengers. I was like every film after that I was like, okay, yep, this is basically the same as that one. Yeah, we're still doing this. Okay, cool. All right, I'm not on board anymore. And I'm still not on board, Tim. I'm sorry. But regardless, my son will keep pulling me aboard, much like that water spirit in Moana. I'll just keep falling off the ship.
Just wait until he clamors to see Spider-Man Far From Home. And if I think that is one of the worst Spider-Man films, then oh boy.
Actually, I've seen that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I mean, it was better than Endgame.
No, that's
Not
false.
That's difficult.
Andrew, stop. Your hot take isn't ready yet.
It's still warm. It's only warm still.
I actually haven't even marked Far From Home on my thing. Oh yeah, actually I do have it. It's way down here. I don't need to review it. It was. Yeah, no. I probably agree with Andrew though. I think I enjoyed it more than Endgame, but right. That's not saying much because Endgame was kind of a low bar for me. But yeah, I definitely like the first Spider-Man better. So nay on Endgame, mild A on Spider-Man Far From Home.
So I said last week that I am tasking myself with catching up, or in some cases rewatching contenders for best films of the decade. And I rewatched Denis Villeneuve's On Sunday from 2010. This is a movie that we talked about for an episode back in 2013, 2014, something like that. And I still hold this movie in high regard because it is superbly constructed. I mean, I love how he plays with the perception of time and memories, and he uses a really deft hand, I think, of going back and forth with the editing to provide kind of like a maximum final impact, which is kind of remarkable. At the core, I think the film is kind of about love and the power of forgiveness and trying to break that cycle of hate. I'm not sure you could have told this in a more appropriate region of the world to get that point across, and it's a very, very powerful film. If for some reason you've seen a lot of the more recent Villeneuve films and you haven't gone back to see this, I highly recommend it because it is one of the best of the decade, and it will probably crack I'm going to be doing a list of 25. I think it will crack my top 10. Andrew, you've seen this?
Yes, I've seen it. It's been a long time. I remember that it was very depressing.
Oh yeah,
at times.
Oh yeah.
I remember there was a pretty dramatic twist at the end, and I remember that overall I liked it.
I didn't remember too much other than the basic plot elements and that twist. I recommend going back and revisiting it. You might appreciate it a little bit more. On Sunday, hi Wally.
Well, as long as it's better than Prisoners.
Yes, it is.
I've got two little things. The first is I finally finished watching Mindhunter.
Oh.
And it's still an excellent series, but I don't think I like the following the one case as investigators so much as I enjoyed their conversations that they had in the first season.
Yeah, I wonder how much they could have gotten out of trying to repeat that first season, though.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, I want to read the book that this is all based on, because the book is written by one of the men who is one of the pioneers, of behavioral science, and so I really want to read the book on this and to see if this is actually maybe covered in the book. I'm not entirely sure, but I feel that it kind of, I don't know, it feels. I mean, it's still very well written, very well acted. Everyone does a great job. But I feel that the overall, following the case as investigators, as opposed to learning things and providing information to an investigation, like they did in the first one, they were trying to track down that other serial killer, and they were kind of exploring this is what his mindset is, and then going through the things that they could possibly do to try to trap him and catch him. Still, it's still EA. It's still definitely see it. I mean, I'm a little disappointed. I'm gonna have to wait probably another 2 years for the next season. But it's still very much EA. And I also caught Dave Chappelle's new stand-up comedy show on Netflix, Sticks and Stones. And apparently this was making waves. A lot of people were very pissed off. But you know what? That set is excellent. It's the kind of comedy people are afraid of. It's the kind of comedy it's really strong-armed. It's very much in the veins of I kind of compare it to like George Carlin before he died. He did a special on HBO that was really angry for him.
Yeah.
Speaking a lot of truth through comedy, and getting people to kind of look at things and examine things and kind of think about things a little bit deeper. And I think this is the improved version of that George Carlin bit, because Dave Chappelle comes off both guns ablazing, and he doesn't stop for like an hour and a half, and makes a lot of interesting points as like stuff to kind of consider, kind of ponder. He's very shrewd. That he did this special, and I appreciate him for this, because I think that if it were anyone else, if it was Daniel Tosh or Anthony Jeselnik or Sarah Silverman, they would be crucified for this kind of show. And I think Dave Chappelle knows that he's got protection because of his pedigree, and the fact that like what he's going after in this special of his, to go after him, to be like, oh, that have the cancel culture come out in force, you would look ridiculous, and it would be a bad look for anybody who tried to go after him like this, and he knows it. And it's just a really well played move on his part, and I think that the special is incredibly well done. And that's one thing that comedians want you to do, is they want you to kind of take a look at things, and they're doing it through jokes, but there's always a certain level of truth behind comedy, as I've always seen it, where they think about this for a second, but like I'm looking at this from a ridiculous angle, but that's because like I've gone past the part where you're thinking about it and now I've completely turned it around on itself. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's also a yay all the way for Sticks and Stones.
Hey guys, this is JD from the In Session Film Podcast. Every week on our show, you can join my co-host Brendan and I as we review the latest films that's out in theaters. It also inspires us to discuss a top 3 list of some sort, and we have a lot of other fun movie discussions as well. It's always a blast. And we also have a show on Fridays called our Extra Film Podcast. This is a show that gives us the space to talk about the latest indies and art films and other classics that we normally just don't get to talk about on our main show. You can find our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, SoundCloud, TuneIn Radio, Player FM, and more. In fact, you can just see everything about us, including our social medias, at InSessionFilm.com. So join us every week. We'd absolutely love to have you.
Okay, now it is time for our semi-regular installment of Scorching Hot Takes with Andrew Johnson.
I got fire in my pants, you about to burn your hands.
Feeling hot, hot, hot. Go F yourself, you burn.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
This is where Andrew burns us all with his opinions that are sure to leave some marks. Andrew, bring us into your fun house of horrible hot takes.
Sure. Well, I was trying to think of a positive hot take to have this time, since I feel like last time I was on, I did a lot of ranting. But now that the summer is over and we're transitioning into fall, I was thinking back about the movies that came out this summer. We had some pretty big releases. We had a Spider-Man movie, a live action, well, not really live action, but supposed to be photorealistic adaptation of The Lion King, a new Toy Story movie. There was a Tarantino movie, and of course there was Avengers Endgame, which became the highest grossing movie of all time. And I already spent my segment a few months ago ranting about Endgame, which in my opinion was definitely the worst movie of the summer. So I started trying to figure out what was the best movie of the summer. And I think my answer might be a little bit of a hot take. The best movie of the summer, in my opinion, was a movie that I think a lot of critics passed over and dismissed. It did okay at the box office. It's currently ranked around 25 on the list of top grossing movies of the year, but I really don't hear a whole lot of people talking about it, except for me and one or two friends of mine. And I want to turn more people onto this film, and that is Richard Curtis's masterpiece. Yes, I said it. It is a masterpiece. Yesterday, directed by Danny Boyle. And for those of you that don't know, Yesterday is a movie about a struggling musician who gets hit by a bus at the precise moment there's a global blackout and wakes up to discover that nobody around him remembers the Beatles. The most famous pop band of all time has disappeared from existence, along with other things like Coca-Cola and many other elements of culture that we currently take for granted. So our main character sees an opportunity and he takes it. He begins playing Beatles songs at local bars and pretending that he wrote them. And the songs are great, of course. So people start to notice him and he eventually becomes super famous. And of course, he discovers that fame isn't all it's cracked up to be. This story isn't anything completely new or original. There's some aspects of it that are fairly straightforward, and yet there are a few twists that left me really kind of stunned, not just in terms of how they disrupt conventional notions of storytelling, but how they add some really interesting thematic depth to what could have easily been just a typical rags to riches to middle class story. And you know, a lot of people didn't like the fact that this movie isn't really concerned with the implications of its premise. It doesn't spend a whole lot of time getting into the details about how a world without the Beatles would be different from our own. But that is actually, in my opinion, its greatest strength. One of the main arguments of the movie seems to be this idea that in the grand scheme of life, the Beatles don't matter. Or at least their fame doesn't matter. The fact that they are the most famous rock band of all time, okay, so what? You know, if they weren't famous, somebody else would be. It doesn't matter if they never had throngs of screaming girls clamoring for them at every show. It doesn't matter if they were never around to influence other musicians. Other people would have been famous. Those people would have influenced future musicians. And sure, history might be a little bit different, but the actual day-to-day lives of most people, you know, the things we really care about deep in our souls, they really wouldn't be that much different. And that's why I love this movie. It's a complete middle finger to the entertainment industrial complex that produced it. It's basically writer Richard Curtis and director Danny Boyle going, okay, maybe we're kind of famous, but you know what? It doesn't matter. There are more important things. You know, I think in some ways this movie is a lot like Inglourious Bastards, actually. I found myself thinking a lot about Quentin Tarantino after I saw this film. But unlike in Inglourious Bastards, instead of indulging the fantasy of killing somebody that we all deem evil from history, it kind of resurrects the music and the artists that we admire and really asks us to view them outside the veneer of fame, to learn to see the Beatles as just people and the songs as just expressions of those people, as just gifts that we can enjoy and dance to and cry with without the shadow of their reputation hanging over it all. And I really think it's more of a Richard Curtis film than a Danny Boyle film, because there's a humanist streak running through Yesterday that I think is kind of a Curtis trademark. But I love this movie. This is a movie that encourages the audience to consider what really matters in life, what the purpose of art really is, what makes art valuable, what makes life meaningful, and to run towards that. It's funny, it's romantic, it's thought-provoking, and in some ways I think it's really quite radical. I really don't think we get a whole lot of movies that are as committed to this film's view of life as ultimately a positive experience and something that can improve and can get better even if we don't necessarily become super famous. So if you haven't seen Yesterday, I would say definitely check it out. I believe it's coming out on Blu-ray in around 2 weeks. It's the best movie of the summer and one of the best movies of the year, in my opinion.
I don't really have much to add to this because I haven't seen it, but I will say I'm not so sure I'm too keen on Positive Andrew here.
You know what? Next time I'm on the show, I'll be sure to really just find something that irritates me and just grind into it. But I want to make sure that a lot of people, I want more people to watch Yesterday, because I honestly really, really love it. I did not expect to like it that much. I was just kind of looking for something to watch with my parents that I thought they would like. And so we went to check it out, and I was just really blown away by how good and how thoughtful it really is. I think if you go into the movie looking for like, oh, what are the implications of this premise and what would history be like in this alternate timeline, then I think you're going to be disappointed. But if you go in just looking for a movie about the nature of art in general and the nature of fame, then I think you'll find a lot to enjoy here.
They can never have yesterday. They can take the future that we'll never know. They can take the places that we said we would go. All the broken dreams, take everything, just take it away.
Do you like movie podcasts hosted by inebriated people? That's Kai with the cracking voice and Heather's touched by evil. One thinks he's Spider-Man, the other is a ninja. It's the Man I Love Film podcast, it's the Milkcast.
Hey everybody, I'm Kai.
And I'm Heather.
And we are the hosts of MILFcast, the Man I Love Films podcast, the unofficial official podcast of manilovefilms.com. This is a podcast where we like to talk about what we've been watching, talk about movies, but mainly we just like to drink, be silly, and play a whole bunch of games. So we think every other week you should grab a drink, snuggle up, and let us make sweet love to your ears.
Otherwise, we'll make sweet love to your couch.
So come and find us on iTunes. Just search for MILFcast.
This podcast is a proud member of the Lamb Podcasting Network. Find the network at largeassmovieblogs.com.
Okay, let's talk about It, Chapter 2.
I crashed my car. Seriously? Yeah. Man, I hear you. I mean, my heart was literally like pounding right out of my chest.
I thought it was only me.
It was like pure fear. It's fear. Why'd we all feel like that, Mike? You remember something we don't you, Mike?
Something happens to you when you leave this town. Farther away, the hazier it all gets. But me, I never left. So yeah, I remember all of it.
Pennywise.
The plot. 27 years after their first encounter with the terrifying Pennywise, the Losers Club have grown up and moved away until a devastating phone call brings them back. The director, Andy Muschietti, the actors Jessica Chastain, James McAvoy, Bill Hader, and a lot of others, and a lot of returning kids as well. Andrew, I guess the first place to start is what did you think of the first chapter, and what did you think of this one?
I liked the first chapter, and I rewatched chapter 1 before going to see this installment. And I think that the first one is good. Not great, but good. There are a few pretty effective scenes. I think that this installment is a step down. I was a little bit disappointed by it. I don't think it's quite as bad as some critics are making it out to be, but it's definitely not what I think it had potential to be. Overall it was kind of fine and forgettable.
Wally, you weren't that big of a fan of the first one, were you?
No. This whole thing is just one big nostalgia cash grab for people who are, and I'm doing air quotes here, afraid of clowns. Okay? Because let me ask you, when's the last time you saw a fucking clown? You probably haven't. You know why? Circuses don't go around anymore. Clowns aren't a thing. So there's a lot of people who go out there and go, terrified of clowns. Yeah, when's the last time you saw one? Huh? And this is just like, oh, remember when we were young and we saw the scary clown thing? Let's go see the scary clown again. So no, I have no love for this series whatsoever. That being said, the first installment I actually thought was quite good. I was actually very much enjoyed the first one. Actually, it actually surprised me. And then I asked my wife if she wanted to come see it, chapter 2, and she responded with, and I quote, "The second half is the most boring part." and so I went, and I was bored to tears at Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and then this movie topped that because I was really hoping the clown was going to eat me about halfway through. This movie is plotting. It is bloated. There, when we get to the spoiler part, there's a scene that we didn't even fucking need 20. This movie could have been an hour and a half, and not 3 hours. You could have done everything this movie does in an hour and a half efficiently. And this movie just bloats itself because it's like, oh, look at us. Remember all of these things from the miniseries? And characters just so weakly. The kids had more balls than these freaking adults did. Way more. Way more gumption, way more force, way more bravery than these fucking adults are all spineless people. And they're supposed to be grown-ups. I'm like, oh, yeah, you guys are really going to fight this thing? All right, yeah, well, good luck. And I was just jaw down, drooling. Just please God, let this fucking movie end. Oh no, we're still going. And then finally, when the credits hit and the lights went up, I walked out. I'm like, there may be something at the end of the credits, but I've spent enough time in this theater. I'm getting the fuck out.
Romano.
Okay, I was a fan of the first one. I think it definitely was a step up from the low bar that was the miniseries. I've never read the book. I didn't rewatch the first chapter before going into this one. But I think I'll echo what Andrew and Wally have already said. I definitely think it was a step down. I didn't hate it. I still had a good time watching it. But I think I definitely, where Wally pushes nostalgia away, I press it to my bosom. I love nostalgia. Like, nostalgia is a very powerful thing for me. I loved watching the kids, as their little losers club and kind of, doing their thing. In the first film, I thought all the performances were good and they really kind of sold all the, the types of characters they were trying to portray. I think I had less fun. I mean, I think it goes out saying, like, just watching adults kind of sort of go through the motions. You got this kind of like sort of love triangle thing going on, which I think is not as interesting watching adults do it as, having the kids kind of, also experience that very same thing. I just feel like it just was a step down in like pretty much every level, even from the Pennywise aspect. Like, I think in a movie that's like almost 3 hours long, I feel like he's not in it as much as I thought he was going to be. And when he's
in it for 10 minutes on a 3 hour movie. 10 minutes.
And there are moments when he is like kind of controlling people's fears that were, I don't know what the intention was because I could see it going either way, but I feel like my audience would undercut scenes by laughing at them. Like, there were so many scenes that I think were supposed to come off as these are scary moments in the film, and the audience was laughing. Like, I watched it with a packed audience and like uproarious laughter at the things that were happening on screen, and I'm like, what is happening? And I just feel like that was definitely a negative as far as like the theater going experience, because not that I'm ever really scared at these films, but hearing a bunch of people laugh at scenes that I think are supposed to be horrific, it really kind of just, turned me off. So yeah, overall, definitely not as good as the first chapter, but I didn't hate it either.
So as I talked about when we discussed the first movie, it's impossible for me to be objective about these movies because the book is my favorite book of all time. I've read it at least 4 times in my life, and I have a deep connection to that series, that book. And so, as with the first time I watched the first movie, it was almost impossible for me to judge it on its own merits because I kept comparing it. And seeing what they left in and what they left out and what they had to adjust and all that kind of stuff. And it took me another 2 watches. Like, I rewatched it for the 3rd time last week, and I like it more the more I watch it. I am able to appreciate it a lot more on its own merits without trying to compare it. And because I think it's actually a pretty good film. And I have a feeling the same is going to happen to me with subsequent watches of part 2, because now I do agree it's not as good, it's not as well constructed as the first movie. It's bigger, it's bolder, it is a lot sloppier, but I appreciate the ambition. I think there is a strong emotional core. It's clear for me to see how much they are attempting to fit into this adaptation and what is or isn't able to be translated from page to screen. So even with that, I kept thinking, earlier on in the film when they introduce the more mystical elements, and I'm like, oh yeah, it becomes more cosmic, and I'm like, how much of this cosmic shit are they going to have by the end of the movie? And I kept thinking about that as the movie was going along. So there's a lot of stuff going in my mind. But I do like the cast a lot for the adults. I think they all play their roles pretty well. I think the only nitpick I have is the adult Ben Hanscom, this Jay Ryan. He's kind of a nothing screen presence. But I do agree with the wide praise about Bill Hader, and I also really like James Ransone and their chemistry together as well. I do think that the first third of this film is very rushed. You guys, Wally, you talked about the pacing and how it was plotting. There wasn't really any moment that I felt was plotting. I thought if there was anything wrong with the pacing, it was that there's too many rushed moments, especially in the first third of the film. Like, one moment you see all the phone calls to the adults, and the next moment they're all meeting at the restaurant in Derry. There's no time to be able to expand on understanding their headspace as adults, with all that time that has gone by. Once again, I'm probably just admitting my own bias with the source material, where I'm trying to fill in gaps, or I'm trying to say, hey, this should be here, when there's stuff that isn't. I don't know. As far as the flashbacks in the middle part of the film, I think it's pretty obvious, that they needed them in order to fill in story and plot elements for later on in the conclusion. And one of my biggest problems with that is the individual moments for each character to find their tokens. I think those moments suffer from kind of odd editing techniques that take away from that emotional growth or discovery or rediscovery that they're trying to go for in those moments. I think a re-edit of this film, in like combining the whole thing into one big 5-hour epic and re-editing some of the scenes, I think will help shore up some of those things and really make it a stronger overall watch. So yeah, I don't know. Overall, I think I'm a little bit stronger than you guys are, and I get it with some of the horror moments in which are we supposed to laugh? There's a really bad musical cue when something vomits onto adult Eddie, and it's really striking. I don't even know what the point of that was.
I honestly, that was one of the questions I was going to pose to you guys, is that if that actually happened, because I honestly thought it might have been someone's phone ringing at that exact moment, because it seemed so odd that I was like, did someone's phone ring and they shut it off real quick? Because it just seemed to align in such an odd way that I'm like, wow, that was almost perfect, because people actually laughed after it happened, and I'm like, I honestly thought it was just someone's phone ringing at that exact moment, because it was such a weird music choice too, because it didn't seem to have anything to do with anything.
Andrew, what did you think about like the emotional core of this film that they were trying to go for?
I think you're right that it's very ambitious, and I really applaud what they're aiming for. And I'll have more to say when we get into spoilers, but I actually don't mind some of the pacing issues. I don't mind the fact that Pennywise isn't in it a whole lot. I think the idea of having a horror film that's really just about exposing the horror of the past and repressed trauma is interesting. And I don't mind the whole artifact search aspect of it if that's what it takes to get us there. I think my main problem is just that I don't think those, when it comes right down to it, a lot of those emotional scenes that are supposed to get at who these characters are really just don't quite hit the mark. And so as a result, I was less invested than I think I should be, and the movie does feel like it drags.
See,
as a result.
for me, and we'll get into spoilers, I think it make that emotional core, it makes up for it at the end when it feels like almost like a new age group therapy intense session. Based on what they're chanting, and we'll get into that in spoilers, but I think that moment makes up for any lack of emotional kind of catharsis or whatever in the earlier parts of the movie. Wally, was there anything that worked for you in this at all?
No, none of this. This was just. None of it worked. No, there was nothing really. The only thing I thought was weird, and like, it seemed like that the director at the very beginning of the movie, he settled down after the first third, was basically using every hack director's camera trick in the book to some of these shots. The whip zooms and the strange colors and all that stuff. I'm like, what are we doing? Like, there's no consistency in that first third when it comes to your cinematography. It's all over the place, and then that's distracting. And then you've got, because the rest of the story is fucking dull as shit. And that's one thing I really enjoyed. The one thing that I take it back, was one thing that I took away from it is the fact that when we get into spoilers, I will tell you, because just like the miniseries, the ending sucks, and everybody is telling you in the movie the ending is gonna suck. The ending is gonna suck. Everyone's telling you that, and we'll get to spoilers, and I'll mention it again.
Hermano, you're the biggest horror guy here. Is there any horror moments that worked for you?
No, like I said, I really felt like they were undercut by laughter. I honestly couldn't tell what this film was going for. In the first one, I felt like it was palpable. You were experiencing these kids be really scared, and it was believable. That garage scene where Pennywise appears from the film. I thought there were like good moments like that in the first one. The Georgie scene was amazing to open the film. There were great horror moments in that film, and I feel like the ones here, I'm not sure if they just thought like it wouldn't play as well with like, Bill Hader being afraid of what he is, or, they kind of rehash some of the same ones too, because these people are having these repressed fears or emotions all of a sudden come back to them as adults, but it just doesn't work visually as much. So I think that's why people were laughing, because
I'll agree, because I think almost the entire scene where Beverly is in her old apartment with the old lady is really well done, but then the way it ends with the creature is it's an odd choice for a creature design.
Well, people were laughing even as the build up to that, because they just felt like it was uncomfortable. It started off as sort of uncomfortable laughter, because the situation just felt really just awkward. And then as you get little glimpses of like, the person moving in the background and she's not aware, and the audience is being like, it's like kind of a slow build up. But everyone was giggling, and then when it eventually what appears, you're like, everyone just like, I mean, like I was watching a comedy. I was like, wow, really? Like, I know it's not. I mean, I'm not scared. I didn't expect people to just jump out of their seats, but I just didn't expect that reaction either, and it was just an odd experience.
Here's why I think it's so awkward. I think that the execution of the horror in this film represents a fundamental, not necessarily a misunderstanding, but certainly a misrepresentation of what the horror in this story actually is. And I think that the first movie has some issues too, but it's a little bit better about it. To me, the scariest moment in chapter 1 is when Ben is being bullied and they cut into his stomach, and a car drives by and adults see what is happening and they just move on.
Yeah.
And as they drive away, a balloon floats up in the backseat of the car. And that to me is the scariest moment because it communicates so much. It just communicates fear of adults not doing anything, fear that the world really is just out to get you and nothing's going to change. And it gets at this idea that there's this evil lurking within Derry that everyone is complicit in.
Yeah, you're right. I don't think it pushes that idea enough in the second film, because it's supposed to be like there's this rot in the middle of Derry that is fear, and that's why Pennywise, this creature, is drawn to it, because it can feed on this fear, and what that fear is rooted in various, it manifests itself in various ways, and it doesn't hammer that point home enough, or it doesn't even really depict it that much at all. And I wish, once again, I'm inserting my own personal bias, my own memory, I'm filling in a lot of blanks where I obviously you guys are pointing out that it's just not there. It's not shown at all in the film, and it may be alluded to by adult Mike, because he's been in there, he's been researching this his whole life, so it just isn't enough, and it isn't even there subtextually as well, not even nearly as well as that moment you just described, Andrew. So
right, and the real horror of this story isn't a clown. It's what happens to people in real life.
Yeah.
That's the horror, and that I think is what's missing from chapter 2, is a real focus on those real life traumas. I think the second best scene in the first movie is the scene with Beverly in the bathroom with just the blood, and there's no appearance of Pennywise the clown. It's just this image of blood that gets at her fears of maturity, of adulthood, of sexuality, of what that might mean with her father. And it communicates so much just with this image of blood covering a young girl in a bathroom. We don't need all of these literal monsters. The real monsters are inside us. And I think that the problem with It Chapter 2 is it's so intent on just throwing CGI monsters everywhere that it really undermines the true horror of what the characters are going through.
Anything else to mention before we get into spoilers? No, we're good?
No, I think we're ready for spoilers.
Okay. Okay, Hermano, what did you think about how this movie wrapped up?
I thought it was similar to the way the kids dispatched him the first time, so it was odd that they had a hard time remembering how they took him out the first time, with just kind of, I don't know what the intent that was there was. Like they were just finding some sort of like inner strength, not being afraid of him, like them as a group, just, pretending that he's really just not as scary as they're basically the ones that are giving him his strength by being afraid all the time, or
Well, they were
not.
duped into thinking that this ritual of chud, which is probably I don't know, it's a hit and miss thing. It's certainly one of the weaker elements of the film, I think, but it all is supposed to be the spark plug for them finding these tokens, and then I found myself, as it was going to shit at the end of the movie, like, well, why was that even in here? What was it even a necessary element? I was like, well, yeah, it was, because it needed that for the plot of the middle part of the movie. However hit and miss that was, but it also, like that you talk about there, they dispatch him in a similar manner. I think it's because they're adults and they're stronger mentally than they were as kids, that they were able to figure out that if you keep hammering home the idea that he is nothing, and you are more powerful than him, and you aren't afraid, I think it works.
Yeah, I feel like the way it was conveyed in the film, it seemed almost too simple. Like, they did have to go through some sort of like test, like in finding their tokens and kind of overcoming certain obstacles in a sense. But then by the time they get to the end, and it's like, I feel like the end goes on forever too. Like, it feels like the end is essentially the entire third act. Like, it just goes on for so long. And I guess I felt like coming into this review, like I was going to have so many questions for Tim, because I know he'd read the book a bunch of times, and it was going to kind of be like, did I just miss something in the first chapter? But like, I felt like there were things sort of retroactively added in this film that maybe I missed in the first one, or maybe they just didn't include it in the first one. And it seems worse that it's only in this one. Like the addition of Bill Hader's character might be gay, or is gay, but like it was never really addressed, I don't think, but when there was kids.
No, it wasn't.
Right?
Yeah, no.
Yeah, so it feels weird that they they have this like flashback scene and retroactively add it. It feels like a lot of stuff is just kind of shoved in, and I wish they would have built upon it from the first chapter and carry it over into this one.
From what I've heard and read is that Andy Muschietti really wanted to make this movie into two separate movies, but the studio said no. And so obviously there's a lot of stuff that was forced to be cut out or forced in, or however it wound up. And also, when you talk about the first movie, I don't think that they were confident. Anybody was really confident that there was going to be an opportunity to make a second movie. They were kind of surprised that it was so popular and it earned so much money. So that's why I think the first movie feels a lot more complete, because they thought that was pretty much, that might have been it. And that's why I think a re-edit, supercut, if you will, of this will be a better experience.
I don't know if an edit could really improve it that much, just because I'm not sure I guess you could say the horror set pieces that the characters go through in the second half of this film feel that connected to their trauma that they have to revisit in the first half. And it feels really kind of jumbled and random. For example, as was already mentioned, the fact that Richie is gay and is closeted.
Well, that's the thing, though, is that if you re-edit it so that earlier on in the film you see that moment at the arcade, and you see that moment with the lumberjack statue, and then it's mirrored again later on, you'll have that emotional arc.
Well, right, and that's what I mean, is that I didn't really get the sense in the second half of the film that Richie was dealing with any of that. And as was already mentioned, they never really bring it back up. And you've got these characters. I forget what's the name of James Ransone's character. Eddie. Okay, so Eddie had a domineering mother, and we get the first time we see Eddie, we can tell that he's got kind of a domineering wife. And Bev was abused by her father, and now she has an abusive husband. And the cycles of trauma are repeating themselves. And there's no follow-up to that, and there's no real attempt to dive into that. I mean, Bev's climactic moment is she's back in the stall from high school, and Ben's big moment is he's drowning in sand, which I don't see how that's connected.
Well,
to,
yeah,
because his childhood fear.
He built the clubhouse. The clubhouse is collapsing in on itself.
Yeah.
Right, but how does that relate back to his fears and his insecurities about being overweight or anything like that?
Well, he's an architect, and basically his building has failed. The one thing
I could see that. That he's an architect and this is his building that's failing. But I just felt like there wasn't a whole lot of focus on, okay, we've established what these characters' traumas are. Now we have to actually take them through that trauma and help them overcome it. And I never really felt like the movie did that.
Well, I mean, if you remember from the first movie, Beverly is introduced by being teased in the bathroom stall and has a bunch of trash dumped onto her. So that.
But is that really her main source of trauma? No, it's the fact that she was abused and now she has an abusive husband.
Well, I mean, the blood
and that's never really
the drowning.
addressed.
The drowning in blood is reflected again in that stall as well. So, you're right. It's not. It's sloppy again. It's sloppy, but I think that there is an opportunity to fix it. I think there really is. As weird as this ending is with the big spider, I kept wondering about the choice to keep the Pennywise head on this gigantic spider creature. And I'm like, why? What is the point of that? I don't get it.
If you're going to pay Bill Skarsgård to be in this movie, you might as well get your money's worth.
I guess. I don't know.
Well, I guess it looks more interesting than just a giant spider.
I don't know. I think they could have developed some sort of... I mean, you look at when he throws the deadlights onto Bill Hader, which, by the way, is a fantastically constructed scene where he's saying... yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker, and gets cut off, and that moment where he gets cut off is really well done, I think. But that idea, the mouth with teeth and the deadlights in the back, there has to be a better design for... I'm just saying, without the clown makeup and head doing that. There has to be the actual creature design has to be more interesting if you're going to finish him off like that. Because having him shrink and shrink and shrink to this really tiny itsy-bitsy clown where they pull out his heart. Now, by the way, I talked about that scene right there where it feels like this new age group therapy session. I think that's really interesting where they are literally confronting their fears and shouting it down in a way into nothingness, essentially, and they crush it with together with their hands. I think that's a really interesting scene, and I like that visual. I like that how it sounds and all that kind of stuff. Except for the miniature Pennywise.
I actually think the visuals in that scene of what's happening to Pennywise are pretty cool. It seemed like they used some practical effects and not just CGI. I thought it looked really good. I don't know. I didn't quite feel like that moment was supposed to have the impact that I think it was intended to have. I saw someone said something kind of snarky on social media. I can't remember who it was, but basically, so they defeat the kids who were bullied as kids basically defeat the monster by teasing it,
right.
Which is kind of weird. I'm not sure if that's a good message to be sending people or not.
Yeah.
The trauma that was done to you, just revisit it back on other things that scare you and you'll be fine. But it was just kind of weird.
I agree. It's kind of weird. Honestly, I can't be objective about this. I'm the least objective person on this, and I'm fully admitting it. I'm fully admit my hypocrisy as well. I always say screw the source material and be as objective as possible. I am the height of hypocrisy right now, where it's impossible for me to be objective about this movie. So, Wally, Hermano, is there anything else you want to finish off with?
Oh, well, we have not Josh Brolin nor Ethan Hawke's little go retrieve an artifact because he doesn't need to fucking do it. That's 25 minutes of bullshit. He's got it in his fucking pocket the whole time. Fucking moron. That made me. Once he was like, "Oh, I kept this in my pocket the whole time." Like, seriously, you had this the whole time? I had this 25 minutes of you hiding in a locker, being chased by a fucking clown, and you had it in your pocket the whole time. You know, they're going through they're getting Infinity Stones, is what they're doing. They're going back and revisiting all this and coming up with treasures so that they can sacrifice something. Those are Infinity Stones. Literally, one of them is a stone from the rock fight. How would you even know which one? I thought maybe there was like red on it. Maybe that's supposed to be like the stone that hit the kid in the head. Maybe, I don't know. And then you finish the clown off with the Care Bear stare, because that's what you guys did. You all stood together, and at that point, you know, maybe lights could have come out of your belly and hit Pennywise. I would have accepted that. Like, you know what, this has been this stupid, and everyone's been saying it's gonna have a shitty ending, including the author himself. Which I want to know: does Stephen King really sound like that, or was he doing an affectation?
That's a good question.
Because I've never really heard him speak, and so like he really had that thick Maine, you can't get there from here, accent going, which I thought was kind of cool.
I have
to see him in his own movie.
I have heard him speak before. However, I don't remember the accent. It's a good question.
And
I think he was playing it up a little bit.
And then basically saying like, yeah, the ending sucks. This ending sucks. And I'm like, yeah, it does suck. And then we're gonna go back to the spider monster, and there it is. And we're gonna Care Bear. And they're gonna Care Bear stare. At that point, I was like, mercifully, let this be done with.
Hermano, anything?
Thankfully.
I kind of sort of enjoyed the mini subplot with James McAvoy's character of being criticized for not being able to finish his writings very well, and obviously that's probably like a stand-in for Stephen King. I think he's been criticized for himself for this exact same thing, but I think we can all agree that Frank Darabont rescued him in The Mist and finished that film perfectly, right, Tim?
Yes.
You agree?
I agree with you.
Crickets.
Thank you, Andrew.
Crickets.
But I do think that it's weird because I think it's a film that almost gets there. Like, I feel like because there's a decent amount of characters, some characters do get moments to shine, even though if they feel a bit like rehashes of what they did as their younger selves, like with James McAvoy character as an adult, again revisiting the idea of all the guilt he feels about what happened to his brother and how he should have been there for him, and how he just kind of in that moment finds it in himself to be like, it really wasn't my fault. So, like, there's no way I could have ever predicted that something like that could have happened, and I got to stop blaming myself and stuff like that. And like the Ben character in that moment where he's about to die, he like finds his voice to finally say what he's been wanting to say to the Beverly character all this time, and say that he was the one that wrote that poem to her, and in a way he kind of saves the both of them in that moment. Like, I think it's almost there. Like, I feel like it needed a bit of polish, and it could have been a lot better. Like, I don't know if like I agree with Tim that like someone's gonna come in with a sweet edit and like completely save this film, but I wish, like, I don't know, I wish they wouldn't have rushed it and maybe had like, and even I kind of agree with Andrew, like the Bill Hader character, like I just feel like he doesn't ever come out to his friends, right?
Right.
Nope.
Like he's still kind of holding that I guess perceived shame, or like whatever it is that is stopping him from coming out or ever telling his friend his true feelings. And it's weird, like it's just like, why do some characters feel like they're moving on and other characters still feel like they're stuck?
He came out to himself at the very least. I think he fully acknowledged his feelings by finishing the
going
carving
back on the bridge and recarving the E.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like, I don't know. I don't know that was. I mean, I like the finish to that, like him going back to the bridge and stuff like that. I feel like he hid behind his comedy. Like they were just like, it's weird. It feels like he was just hiding behind all that, and he could never really ever come out to his friends. Like, I don't know.
All right, let's get into grades, Andrew.
Oh, real quick before we do grades, yes. I just want to say, speaking of comedy, there were way too many jokes at inappropriate times in this movie. Like at one point, I think it's Bill Hader's character murders somebody and immediately cracks a joke, and it just was just tonally so jarring. There are moments of comedy in here that really don't belong. And lastly, I just want to say that, Tim, if someone out there does do a re-edit of this movie, I hope that they will cut a lot of the music. I feel like the single biggest issue with a lot of the quote-unquote scary scenes in this movie is that the music is so overbearing. It is so loud. It is just trying to guide the audience about what to feel, and as a result, there's no true terror. And if it is something that lurks in silence and lurks in denial and in the past that you can't really quite see clearly, then I think that a lot of the scenes in this movie would be more effective if they were just done in silence.
You talk about him killing somebody, a character that's Henry Bowers, and that's another character that feels very, very rushed in the beginning of the movie, where his, I don't know, just his motivations and his that connection that Pennywise has to him in order to commit some of these murders and whatnot it just feels edited, rushed. And I just once again found myself thinking there must be more scenes that they just cut out in order for time's sake regarding his character.
And did we really have to make the chubby kid, not Josh Brolin nor Ethan Hawke level attractive all of a sudden?
I don't know what you mean. What do you mean?
I hate that fucking trope in movies.
Yeah.
Like the chubby kid who everyone's picked on before is suddenly this buff hot guy.
You can
who's
blame
suddenly filthy rich.
You can blame the source material.
Oh really?
Oh yeah.
I actually don't mind that, because I think that it could work in this story if that character of Ben he's so traumatized by being bullied as a kid due to his weight that he just, works out a lot and becomes this attractive, buff guy. I think that's fine. That's connected with his trauma that the film is really trying to explore and get at. The problem is then they never really do anything with that,
Andrew, grade?
I'll give it a C.
Wally?
D-.
D-. I'll stick with a B. I'm sorry, I'm not objective. It could be a B+ upon rewatch. I don't know. Hermano?
I'm gonna give this a B-, but it could have gotten an A- if during that locker scene where there's a New Kids on the Block poster behind Ben as he's hiding in the locker, and you only see the one character's face from New Kids on the Block, and they cut away and then cut back to it, and I swear to God, I thought they were gonna do the New Kids character was gonna come to life on the poster, and I was like, oh man, if they do this is the greatest film I've seen all year.
Nice. All right, that does it for this episode of the First Time Watchers podcast. Donate via patreon.com/firsttimewatchers or buy stuff at zazzle.com/firsttimewatchers.
You can talk to us on Twitter at 1STTimeWatchers on Twitter.
Or write us at our email, firsttimewatchers@gmail.com.
Download our episodes on Apple Podcasts and Stitcher. Feel free to leave a review. We love feedback. If you have any suggestions of movies for us to watch, please send a tweet or an email. Speaking of suggestions, let's recommend a movie. I will go first. A movie that was released earlier this year and is just now on DVD is Shadow. This is from the director Yimou Zhang. You may know him from making movies like Hero, House of Flying Daggers, Curse of the Golden Flower.
Great director.
Yeah, this is one of the best looking films of the year, primarily black and white with little splashes of color, some red. If you get, you'll understand why. But it looks like it was practically shot in black and white. Like a lot of the sets and costuming is black and white. It doesn't look like it was filmed in black and white film. It's really interesting. Or there's probably a lot of good post-production work too, but there's a lot of richness in those blacks, whites, and grays. The story, it's just a melodramatic tale of the court in ancient China. Most of that takes place in the first half and the final scene, but there's some fantastic action sequences in between, mostly in the second half. Amazing choreography, slow motion, footwork. Love the score. More hit and the miss. You could do worse. So very much worth a watch. Shadow. Wally.
All right, so even though it was weird watching Professor X without his powers, James McAvoy is in another movie that deals with inner demons as well, and I think it does a pretty damn good job of it. It's one of my more favorite movies.
It's Glass, right? It's
when
Glass.
it came out,
Glass.
It is not Glass. Though I will say he's the best part of Glass, believe it or not. I'm talking about a movie that I know, Tim, you weren't keen on this movie, and it was in my top. I believe it was my top 5 of 2013, and that's Filth. A corrupt junkie cop with bipolar disorder attempts to manipulate his way through a promotion in order to win back his wife and daughter while also fighting his own inner demons. This movie is excellent. I loved this movie. I actually went out and bought a copy once it hit Blu-ray. And this movie it's dark, it's grim, but also darkly funny. Where you're actually supposed to laugh. There's a gif of the movie where this kid pegs off James McAvoy. So he pops his balloon with a cigarette and then double birds him. Like, he doesn't give a fuck. But this movie is very good, and it's got a very interesting ending to it. Way better than this one.
Andrew.
My recommendation was already previously mentioned. If you are a Stephen King fan, I think the best Stephen King related movie of the past 20 years, possibly ever, certainly of the past 20 years, is The Mist. It is an absolutely incredible monster movie. If you're in the mood for a movie about confronting fears and horror in which the horror just grows and grows and you can never escape it, definitely check out The Mist.
You really cop out with the ending, don't they? Yes, they do.
It's the perfect ending.
Perfect. Way
ending.
better than the book.
Yeah, confronting those fears, really cop it out there at the end.
They don't confront.
No, they don't.
That's the problem. Is that the fear eventually overwhelms all of us, as is true in life sometimes.
If they only waited 30 more seconds. Hermano.
All right, I'll do the easy thing. Just watch some Naruto.
Oh, God.
Netflix, Hulu, 720 episodes. Just a small investment of your time.
Oh my God, 720.
Andrew, there you go.
No.
Just watch. You can watch all of the
stop.
720 episodes of Naruto for your film class.
God.
I'm currently trying to work my way through Star Trek and all of the Star Trek series. I think I'll need a bit of a break before I try to check out all of Naruto.
Andrew, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it was a blast.
Where can people find you online?
You can find me online at Twitter and Letterboxd. My username is Writer Andrew. If you are interested in reading more of my thoughts on Yesterday, I will have an article out in around 2 weeks for The Porch magazine, all about Yesterday and its relationship to Inglourious Basterds. So be on the lookout for that.
Excellent. And stay tuned for our next episode. It'll be crossing off a list of shame film from Walter's list as we discuss David Lynch's Blue Velvet.
That's the First Time Watchers podcast because we like to watch. As soon as I got to the computer and put up my laptop to load up Skype, I was like, shit, I knew I forgot something today. Oh well. I have to ad lib it out.
No, we're not doing anything. I got a pre-recorded thing to go in.
Oh sweet.
Yeah. So you can send your apologies directly to Brendan Cassidy. And definitely not JD Duran. You don't have to apologize to JD.
I will not apologize at all.
That's good.